podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Helena Clayton, and in this 6-part series, we're exploring love in coaching. With 25 years of working in leadership and organisational development, for the last 8 years, I've been researching, writing about, and running leadership programs and workshops exploring the role of love in leadership, in work, and beyond. And for this series, I brought together 6 amazing coaches as my guests, all of whom are strong advocates and pioneers in what they do, and how they think about and integrate love into their coaching. 3 of them are writing books about love. 1 has just submitted their master's thesis about love, and another talks so boldly about love to their international and very senior leadership audiences that it takes my breath away. So thank you for being here and for bringing your curiosity to this thought-provoking series at a time when the world needs love more than ever. So welcome, folks. Today I am delighted to be in conversation with Aboodi Shabi. Aboodi and I go back a long way. I can't remember when, but we very rarely get the chance to speak. So this is for sure a delight. And for those of you who've heard Aboodi speak before, you know it'll be a delight. And what territory are we covering? Well, for sure, love and coaching, right? That's what this series will focus on. But knowing in part Aboodi's interests and mine too, we will also explore, I'm pretty sure, spirituality and the links perhaps between love and spirituality, but also the question of the place spirituality has in coaching. Could coaching be considered a spiritual practice? And there are lots of connections that Aboodi and I can make there. So that's where we're broadly heading. But just before we pressed go, we also said we weren't entirely sure where we'd head for this next conversation. So let me first say a huge warm welcome to Aboodi and ask him to introduce himself to you.
Yeah, thanks, Helena. God, I don't know. What do you want me to say?
I don't know. Whatever is up for you today.
So I'm Aboodi Shabi. I've been coaching for about 30 years and I recently just left my post at Henley and I'm entering a new phase of semi-retirement and not quite sure what that looks like. But I have just started a supervision course because I'm doing more and more supervision of coaches. New fields await and I don't know what's in them, just like this conversation.
Lovely. Yeah, me too. I was talking with somebody the other day about the word retirement and how tricky it is, but semi-retirement for sure opens up, or it feels like it opens up loads of more possibilities. So yeah, maybe we'll go there too. So I'm tending to start with this question, which is something about, can you map the field of your coaching? So it's sort of something like, what are you seeing these days that people are bringing to coaching? Perhaps that is different from previous epochs or times or years. And is there a link to love? Are the things that people are bringing, are the ways that people show up, do they invite more love, I wonder? So it's that sort of territory.
I think it's a very interesting question, partly because I've been coaching for such a long time. I remember when the coaching profession was very new in the mid-90s and it was very exciting. And it was also before the dot-com bubble and before 9/11. And I think there was a real sense of optimism and anything is possible, sort of, even though coaching wouldn't describe itself as such, it also came on the back of the new age that was there in the 80s and 90s. So there was this real sense of anything could be possible. And I think coaching put itself out there as a very future-focused profession, helping people achieve their goals and win better. And so it had a lot of kind of hype about being this amazing profession that was for winners who wanted to perform better. And also at that time, coaching would say that there was no place for emotions in coaching. Therapy was for broken people, coaches for winners who wanted to increase their performance, etc. So there's a real positioning of coaching as being something that would help people, if you like, achieve their dreams and have amazing things happen. And I think, that was a lot of hubris, which often comes at the beginning of something, but also the world changed. The dot-com bubble happened, 9/11 happened. The world became a more complicated place. And this idea of always focusing focusing on the positive became more nuanced, if you like. And I think I would say when coaching first started, there was a lot of people coming to coaching, looking to achieve their goals and buying into what the offer of coaching was. And as the profession has matured and the world has changed, and particularly maybe in the last 5 years, 10 years or so, I think people have come with more complicated issues to coaching that aren't just about achieving their goals and their dreams. And there's lots of directions we can go with that. But I think that I would say if all that we wanted to do was achieve our dreams, then we could read books about it. We could now ask ChatGPT how to do it. And there's lots of useful advice and information out there about how to move forward in life and achieve this and do that. But I think there's a hunger for something deeper. And as the world gets more complicated and more challenging, and as the future looks more uncertain for probably most people around, I think there are deeper concerns that come up. And that's where I really do think, I mean, you asked, is coaching a spiritual calling? I absolutely think it's a spiritual vocation. I think there's a spiritual hunger for most of the people around that solutions and quick fixes aren't addressing. And yeah, I don't use the word love so much. I use spirituality a lot when I talk about coaching. I don't use the word love so much when I think about coaching, but I absolutely think that coaching is a space where clients can feel loved in the most broad sense of that word. It's not even unconditional love. It's more like a space where they can come up and be seen, and it's okay to be who they are. And I think most people don't have that in their lives generally. Certainly, a lot of the clients that I work with don't have a space where they can feel that sense of love or connection or spirituality or being seen.
And I want to do two things. Stay with your last thing, actually, first, I think, which is there may be people listening who might think, but is that what coaching is for? And I wondered what you might say in response to that.
I suppose I would say there are lots of different kinds of coaching and coaches out there. And I have a particular stand on coaching, which has evolved over the years, and I'm very opinionated. So, of course, I think my opinion's right. But I do recognize that it's only one perspective on coaching. There'll be plenty of coaches and clients who will say, I just want to move forward with my goals. You know, there are still people who are looking for that, of course, and there are still plenty of coaches filled with offers like that. And it's not for me. But it doesn't mean that there's not a place for it. But I think that some of that kind of coaching will increasingly be done by AI. The kind of performative or performance-related coaching. You know, AI can do the grow model. It can. And, you know, I know this is the Association for Coaching, but I know that ACC standard, AI can meet that. And apparently it's starting to meet some of the PCC standards. So there's a lot that coaches can do that AI can do. And part of why I think the question of what coaching is for might lead more people into this direction is that this is going to be one of the things that distinguishes us from an AI chatbot. I mean, I sometimes ask chatbot for questions about some quandary I'm having, and I know lots of people are going to AI with really deep, intimate questions and getting a reasonable amount of satisfaction from that. So I do think there's something that human coaches can bring that machines can't, and I think it has to do with this territory of the soul or spirituality.
And I definitely will come back there, but let me invite you. Would you say something about your stance on coaching or for coaching? In one of the previous episodes, a conversation with Marie Quigley in this series, she talked a lot about being super clear about when you work with me as a coach, this is what you get. This is who I am. This is my stance. Would you say something in your most opinionated way, in the most...
No one's ever asked me to do that before. Normally I'm asked to tone them down, but...
What is your stance?
You know, something that Edna Murdoch said many years ago. Edna Murdoch founded the Coaching Supervision Academy, and I think she's a very wise soul in the coaching space. And she said, who we are is how we coach. I didn't hear the podcast with Marie Quigley. It might not have been broadcast yet, but
that's right.
I absolutely think who we are is really important. And that's a journey. And, you know, my latest website is much more revealing of some of the aspects of myself that I haven't been so comfortable sharing in the public space before. I mean, I'm an oversharer, so, you know, maybe that's why my website has so much about me. But I think there's also something about this is who I am. My life has not been straightforward. It hasn't been easy. I faced many demons in my life. And I think that when I work with clients, what I'm discovering more and more is that they're also grappling with those demons. And so I think it sort of behoves us to be comfortable with our own demons, to continue to get to know who we are, light and dark, if you like, so that we can hold our clients there. And I do feel really strongly about, and this is where my opinionatedness is going to come in, I have a strong reaction to the kind of shiny, happy coaches that I see on LinkedIn, telling us about their amazing lives, telling us that anyone can achieve their dreams. And I think, have you done your work? Have you faced yourself? Because if you haven't, and you're not willing to go to your own dark places, you're not going to be able to hold your clients who come with their imposter imposter syndrome, or they're feelings like they're not showing up properly at work. One example of a client I worked with a few years ago was a very, very senior guy in a large global corporate, extremely successful. And in our first conversation, it became clear just how much he hated himself, how ashamed he was of his history. He lived in a country where he had to join the army at a young age and did some things that he was very embarrassed and uncomfortable about. And there were other things. His father had affairs and things like that. And it does tie in absolutely with what you're saying, I think, Helena, because really what he needed to do was find a space to love himself. And I think as a result of our coaching, in fact, I heard from the person who introduced me about 3 years later that he was just so much more at peace with himself. So it speaks to the bit about love and spirituality and coaching, but it also, I couldn't have helped him there if I hadn't been in some of the places he'd been. I haven't been in the army, but had to face some of the things that he's had to face. And I've done the personal work that then allowed me to hold him there. And we weren't just coaching around goals.
Yeah, you and I are both working with and know Robin Showett.
Yes.
And a particular theme of his at the moment, I mean, it has been for a while, is we coach out of our autobiography.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we lead out of who we are. We see the world as we are, not as it is, all that good stuff. But we for sure coach or supervise from our autobiography. So to what extent have we, as you say, done our deep work, deep inner work to be okay with that so we can help other people be some version of okay with theirs?
Yeah, yeah.
What else do you stand for in your coaching, if you think of love in particular, but generally, what else do you stand for?
Well, I stand, and I think the coaching profession has a lot more to do on this, very strongly for diversity and inclusion. And I've been disgusted, that's probably the right word, by the way that corporates have backtracked on diversity and inclusion since Trump won his second term. You know, Facebook started it with removing their moderation and things like that. And lots of corporates have started to backtrack on that. I'm seeing and hearing coaches being told, if you want to coach inside American corporates, you can't speak about diversity and inclusion issues. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. I know not everyone agrees with me. I am opinionated, and it is an opinion I hold strongly, but I stand for and think we should be standing up for creating a fairer, more inclusive world for everybody. Otherwise, I don't think it's moral to not take a stand for those things, but also I think then coaching just becomes part of the problem rather than part of the solution. And I think part of the function of coaching is to provoke the status quo and ask challenging questions of it rather than just go along with it. So I think we have to be a little bit more outspoken as a profession.
So 2 words that definitely provoke people and systems are the words love and the word spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely.
In organizational context, right? So would you say something about those 2? I heard you say earlier you tend to lead with spirituality less than love, but what are they? Similar, different? How do they relate to each other? How are they nested or connected?
I think these are really big questions, Helen. I don't have a definitive answer. I mean, I think spirituality is something I continue to unpack about what that means for me, as a coach. There's a prayer that the Jews say in Yom Kippur, which we've just had, and it's forgive us from the sin of hardening our hearts. And I think that most of us learn to harden our hearts to deal with the world. Sometimes we have to do it very early in life because we've had abusive parents or had a difficult time at school. I had a new chemistry session with someone yesterday, and they were just talking about how to fit into the corporate world and show up in a way that wasn't connected to who they were. So I think we're all in that place of hardening our hearts. And it costs us something. It costs us connection. It costs us love. Sometimes that can be very personal, very intimate. Sometimes that can just be about how we show up in the world. And I think that there is something there about allowing a space for more love, however that looks for us. And I think the connection with spirituality, or one way I can think about this, is that, and I'm not religious, but I can hold the concept, because I can hold this paradox reasonably easily now, of a loving God. And it doesn't have to be God in the classical definition of God, whatever that is, but being in nature. I don't feel like I have to perform when I'm in nature. It's probably a step too far to say nature loves me, but I don't feel there's anything in the way of love and me when I'm in nature, or when I'm with my cats in the morning when they come and sit on my bed. These are experiences that are quite spiritual and quite loving. I'm not even sure I'm making sense to myself. I'm thinking some of this aloud, but there is something for me about that sense of the universal love that exists that we don't often touch. And I think spirituality can give us a way to that. And I'm not religious at all, but sometimes I go and sit quietly in a church and I might light a candle for my sister who was a Catholic and died a few years ago. Or if I go for a Turkish bath, there's something about that we leave the world and its concerns behind and go to a place where nothing is going on other than people coming looking for some sort of solace. And I'm a big fan of what Karl Marx said about religion is the opium of the people. It provides succor and solace to people in their plight. And you don't have to be a Marxist to see the value of that statement is, that we need something to provide us with succor and solace from the plight of being human. Even when the world is going well, which I definitely think it isn't at the moment, we still have to deal with our mortality, for instance. We have to deal with the fact that people we love will grow sick and old and die. So this is the plight of being human. And we need something beyond the human, which might be God and the church, or it might be a Turkish bath, or in my case, it's 12-step recovery. These are things that take me out of myself and help me to hold life in a different way than being caught up in it, trying to fix it and solve it. And I think that is a kind of loving spiritual space. I sort of feel like I'm rambling a lot, but I do.
No, it's great. And it's also making me think about how, as coaches, it may be true, it feels true for me, that at least part of my job is to hold as big a space as possible.
Absolutely.
For whatever somebody's bringing, wherever they're at, to hold as if I'm not growing my own capacity, if you like, or size or connection to something bigger and then bigger again and bigger again, I can't really create, hold, stay in a space for my coaching clients.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's where we have to do our own deep work. I remember seeing Sir John Whitmore speak about this. I've seen him speak a few times about this, but one of the things he said that really stuck with me is if I'm with a client and the client starts to cry and I give them a tissue, I've got to work on my own sadness because I've got to be able to be okay with that. And, we've all got emotions that are more difficult for us to be with than others, and they're different for everybody depending on how life experiences. But if we can't do that work and aren't willing to do that, then our clients are going to show up and we're going to be contained by and constrained by our own incapacity to go there in ourselves.
And it's also making me think about if coaching was, still is obviously in large parts, if coaching was about forward movement, achievement of goals, could it be that these days it's more about staying still and abiding with what is here? I'm thinking of, I don't know who coined the phrase about container leadership, how as leaders can we be containers for people's, mostly anxiety in the workplace. So I'm thinking about that in relation to coaching. How can I personally learn to be with whatever is brought in a way that doesn't freak me out, have me reaching for a tool or a desire to move forward, something like that?
Yeah, I think that's really true. And it makes me think about, when you talk about being with, like if a client comes and says they're stuck, or they don't feel like they have any choices in life. I remember once, many years ago, I was doing a keynote at a conference and I was speaking about that clients sometimes come to coaching saying they have no choice and that we have to respect that. And one of the people in the audience was so annoyed with me that she got up, told me off and then walked out saying, this is completely against what I believe about coaching and how dare you even say that it's okay to acknowledge someone who says they have no choice. And, because coaching is all about possibilities, everybody has a choice, is some of the things that people will say. But actually, if a client is feeling stuck or hopeless or they have no agency in their life, can we honor and respect and love them in that space without having to have them be different? And when I first started coaching way back in the late 90s, I would hear coaches say, client would come and they'd say, I'm having a really difficult day. And the coach would say, what's great about that? Where's the opportunity in that? And there's this kind of almost toxic allergic reaction that says, I've got to get as far away as possible from this client's experience. And the client comes away feeling unmet, often like they got it wrong. They're not a good human being. And I think this is where love is really important. It's like, can the client come and feel like whatever they bring is welcome? And I remember a few years ago, I had probably the best therapy I've ever had. It was trauma therapy, somatic trauma therapy. And the therapist said to me in our intake conversation, all your defenses are welcome here. And I showed up in all my obnoxious, defended ways. I tried out every trick I had in my thing, and he just sat there and it was okay. And that, there was lots that was useful about therapy, but that was probably the most profound thing, was that I could just show up being me and I didn't have to hide bits of me. And I think that's what we all want, is a place where we can go and not hide.
Yeah. So you said something a little earlier, coaching could or should be a place where people feel loved. Can I move to a kind of pragmatic, practical take on this, which is,
of course,
there may well be people listening who think, well, I get the theory of being more loving and. What do I do, though? What does that look like in practice? If I was being observed for some mental coaching from the ICF, or if I was being recorded, what would I be doing, saying, not doing? What are some of the pragmatics? I'm loath to go there because I hate pinning it down, but it is a question people have.
But I think it's a really important question. And I suppose I have two thoughts about that. One, we've mentioned Robin Shohet already, and I've just been on my first workshop with Robin Shohet and Joan Wilmot. And one of the things that Robin said was, because someone in the group was asking, is it okay to bring this to supervision? And Robin said, the function of supervision, or a function of supervision, is to help the coach or therapist be more present to the supervisee, the coachee or the patient. And I think there's something there about it's a way of being. So it may not look that the coach is doing anything in particular, but it's how they're being. And I think one of the proofs of the pudding of good coaching and this kind of quality is what's going on in the coachee. Well, I listen to recordings from time to time in various of my roles. And if I'm hearing the coach opening up and sharing who they are and feeling safe to do that, something is being transmitted by the coach that is permitting that. Now, what that looks like, it's not something that you can teach. I don't think you can say it looks like A, B, C, and D. But there is, so it may almost be a non-doing and a being quality. People feel safe, they'll open up. Now, how we make people feel safe, part of that is in the contracting, obviously, but part of that is also just in how we show up. And it's a bit like any relationship. You know, if I meet you for the first time, I'm assessing consciously or unconsciously, can I trust Helena? Can I open up to her? And I might share something a little bit vulnerable. And if I sense, not necessarily in something you do, but in your being, that you're okay with that, I might feel safe to go a bit further. Sometimes we do it by me saying something about myself and then you saying something about yourself. So I think there's a part for the coach to maybe share some of their vulnerability, which goes back to the autobiography and disclosing some of our journey to the client so they can go, yeah, this person is human too. That builds rapport. Sometimes I will share something about myself in response to what the client has said, and their feedback will be, I don't feel alone with this anymore. So again, it's really a way of being thing, I think.
Yeah, and listening to you, it's also making me think about the lens we were exploring earlier. We coach out of our autobiography.
Yeah.
There's a particular thread in that, which is what is my own personal relationship with love from my childhood, right? What did I learn about love, about what it looks like, feels like, that may be healthy, but also unhealthy. So we each have our own unique relationships with love. So when we introduce it, if we do use that word explicitly at work or in coaching, it's problematic because at one level, I think we all know whether something we do is loving or unloving. But once we get a bit more kind of nuanced, your interpretation, if you like, of love would be very different from mine. So that brings additional complexity into bringing love in some way, exploring it even like this.
Yeah, I think that's true. It makes me think about how we kind of use phrases like tough love, for instance. And I was laughing when you said it because a childhood memory came back. My parents were quite abusive in lots of ways and they would punish me and my sister a lot. And they would say, we're punishing you because we love you. And I remember having this discussion with my parents about, do the police punish criminals? I mean, I was like 7 or something, so it wasn't a rational thought, but I just said, do the police love the criminals? And my dad said, yes, they do. So that, you know, there was something about their love being stern and harsh and punishment being part of love that I have absorbed in my deep psyche, I guess. And I do think again about that, you know, forgive us from the sin of hardening our hearts. Help us get closer to a loving presence. And I fully accept that, of course, we've got different ideas of what love is, we've got different stories about it, but a presence where the client can feel held and safe. And that doesn't always have to be nice and tender. There is a place sometimes for Blakey and Day called the loving boot. But it comes out of a relationship. It's not like I've got this tool called the loving boot and I'm going to bring it out every time. There was a coach, and I can't remember who it was now. They called themselves the kick-ass coach. And I thought, yeah, it's great to be a kick-ass coach. But what happens when the client needs something different? Are you able to bring that?
Yeah.
So for me, there's something about love that this is coming out in our conversation, Helena, so I haven't completely thought this through, that I've got to bring myself to it. But I've also got to be in tune with you when I bring it. And I suppose this is the in-the-moment interventions that we make that come out of the connection rather than out of the script.
Yeah. And I occasionally, well, actually quite a lot with leadership development programs at the moment, I'm using the model with a few groups, the radical candor framework, which is a 2x2. One axis is care, so high care, low care. The other axis is challenge, challenge directly, say nothing. And I've known it a little for years, and I've started to do a bit more work with it recently. And now I see it as a model of love, because it's, balancing deep personal care with speaking very directly when needed. But you can only do that when somebody feels safe and held and accepted by you. So yes, the more I explore through my own work, research programs, love, the more I see so many things as forms of love, versions of love.
I had a thought when you were talking just then about when the client feels deeply safe and accepted by you. And I think that's really important, but it looks different for each client. I remember once having this chemistry session with someone who worked in the city, very strong leader, and I was on the back foot. I wasn't able to contain them. And afterwards, they fed back to me that they didn't want to work with me because they didn't feel safe with me. And it wasn't because I wasn't gentle and kind. It was because I didn't have edge that I brought. So I think sometimes, and this is part of the one size doesn't fit all bit, a tough client might need to meet toughness in the coachee to feel safe enough to be loved. I know that sounds a bit paradoxical, but there's something there about, and we talk a lot about this in coaching, don't we? Meeting the client where they are. So just as much as I think the kick-ass coach needs to build range, so does the gentle heart coach need to build range.
And do you have a sense of what coaches might think of, I want to say doing, but being as well? How might we expand our heart's capacity? How might we soften our heart? Let me start with that one first. How have you done it? How do you see others doing it? How do you invite your coaching clients to soften their hearts?
For us as practitioners, it starts with deep personal work. One of my colleagues at Henley used to say all coaches should have therapy. I slightly question that just because I don't want everything to be like 100% rule. But I do think we have to do our deep work. That's how I softened my heart. I started therapy when I was 25, I think. I was an obvious person that needed therapy. Anyone who saw me from the outside would have said that. But, I started that journey relatively young in the 1980s when therapy was still something that lots of people hadn't heard of, was seen as fixing broken people. And then some years after that, I went into 12-step program, which definitely helped me to soften a lot of the defenses I had built to deal with what I had to deal with as a child. And some of it's been formed by my spiritual practice as well. I still go to meetings and I don't have therapy anymore, but I still do that work. But some of it's softer now for me. So spending time with my cat softens me. Going for a swim, and when my body hits the water, I can feel my body softening. And when I go for a Turkish bath, I definitely feel that. And I'm a bit obsessed with Turkish baths because I've just rejoined the space that I used to go to for Turkish baths. But one of the things I've been aware of is on the surface, people arrive and I get, the single gender day. So I go and there's men arrive and they're all in there. Some of them are in their suits, and you might have a rabbi coming in or a rock star coming in, and then we go downstairs and it's just full of people letting go of the outside world, and whatever's going on in the outside world doesn't matter in that moment. And I think that's a real softening. You can get it going to a church, you can get it being with someone you love and care about. And of course, those things aren't enough. You need to do the deep work as well to get to the place where more gentle methods become more effective, I suppose.
Yeah, I like that. So it's exploring softening, not just in a heart capacity, but how does our body soften, right?
Absolutely. The body is the most important part of this because we can talk soft language. We can talk about love and we can talk about spirituality and we can talk about being a space for our clients, but can we actually be that space? I think there's also something about reflection. So I can notice when I tighten up against people, how can I soften? I can't always do it. Noise cancelling headphones help a lot. But, how can I soften? And I can feel my body hardening. Like when I get on the bus and people are noisy, I can feel my body hardening. When someone says something I don't agree with, I can feel my body hardening. When I read the news, I can feel my body hardening. How can I bring softness back to that? And I think I would say this is a lifetime's work. It's not like you go, I'm now relaxed and that's done, or I've been on a wonderful, amazing healing workshop or retreat and now I'm settled, because life is always going to be bringing us tests and challenges. It's a little bit like the spiritual joke, I suppose. If you want to know how enlightened you are, go and spend a week with your parents.
Right.
And all our stuff comes back. And, Sartre, who said, hell is other people. I mean, there's lots of ways you can interpret that, but, being in a world with other people with different opinions than ours, different ways of moving their body, different use of space, thinking it's okay to be on a bus with a speakerphone on, all of these things are the work we have to face all the time. And I think it's really important that we're aware, A, that it's a work in progress, and to be compassionate with ourselves when we lose it or aren't as open and soft as we'd like to be, but also that we keep the practice live.
Yeah. And you're reminding me of a softening practice. It comes from Deborah Rowland, who's a wonderful writer, change agent, fabulous work. And she's steeped in the world of systemic constellations.
Right.
And she has, I'm going to misquote, sorry, Deborah, if you ever get to listen to this, something about everything makes sense once you understand or see the system in which it was born or cultivated. So there's always a sort of, it's sometimes a thought experiment, sometimes a genuine now embodied way of being, which is like, well, of course that person is doing this or showing up like that or being like that because of ... what happened to them or what their life was like. It's like, of course. And even if I still am aware of the hard part of me that wants to judge for that thing, even to just invite in a kind of, well, of course they might show up like that. Or I might, right? More compassion for myself. Well, of course I behave like this in ways that I don't like, because it's not an excuse, but it can, for me, really help me bring a softer heart, I think.
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple of things. One is I absolutely loathe and detest Donald Trump and everything he's doing. But I also know that he had a really difficult childhood. I'm not excusing him. I used to think about Saddam Hussein because my parents were Iraqi, so I have a bit of a more interest in that country than maybe other countries. And he had two children, Uday and Qusay, who were brutes, absolutely horrible people. But I always thought, and then they captured them and they executed them and they said how terrible they were. I thought, well, if you had Saddam Hussein for a dad, you might not turn out to be the most loving soul on earth. So I think there's something about that understanding of the systems from which people come. The other thought that comes to mind is from James Flaherty, who wrote what I still think is the best book on coaching, Evoking Excellence in Others. And he said, I try to find something to love about my clients. And if I can't, I have to work on myself. And I don't like every single one of my clients, but I always try to find something to love about them, because we're different people and they've got different interests or they speak in ways that I don't like or whatever. But can I find something to love about them? And if I can, and my capacity to do that has increased because of the work I've done on myself, then we can coach. If I can't, I'm probably not going to be a good coach for them. And it's not because they're wrong or uncoachable. It's that I'm not able to meet them there.
Very nice. Right. And that really does put a different spin on, is this person coachable? I don't know what the coach equivalent is. Am I ready for this person?
Am I ready for this person? And sometimes I'm not. Just like we can't be friends with everybody. And it's not because those people aren't nice people. We can't connect with them and it's fine. Can I be in peace with that? Okay, I don't find something to connect with at that level with this client. Therefore, I can't work with them at this time.
I'm mindful of our time together, talking of time, and I wonder if you want to take a few minutes to see if there's anything that you had hoped to say or maybe thought you might, or that I cut you off before you didn't get a chance to say, that you might want to say about the territory we've been exploring.
I've really appreciated the silences. Partly the reason I appreciate them, I suppose, it has to do with that quality of companionable silence, which I think is quite a spiritual thing. And it makes me think about, this isn't really adding anything, but it just makes me think about what we said about, throwing in the next model tool rather than being with somebody. And I've heard coaches say, when I've listened to coaches coaching and then we've debriefed it and they've gone, what did you expect me to do? They pulled out model after model after model. What did you expect me to do? Just sit there and I'm like, well, you could give it a try. Like, there is something quite important about this. My cat's going to make an appearance in a moment. Hello. So her name is Menucha, which is Hebrew for rest. And on the eve of Shabbat, Jews will sing a song called Menucha Vesimcha. And my other cat is called Simcha, joy and rest. And there's something about that quality of rest that feels important for all of us. It's a spiritual quality, I think. It's certainly Shabbat is a spiritual day and it's about rest. I mean, it's also about connection to God if you believe in God, but it is about switching off from the week. And I think there's something about silence that allows us to do that. And our clients often arrive, especially now that we do a lot of our work on Zoom. They've just finished one meeting, they're in their heads with that meeting, and then they know that right after our meeting, they've got to go to another meeting. There's something about creating that space of quiet between us that feels really important. And I think that's part of what we're talking about. It's almost like another dimension of that being thing. And one of the things that when we teach the coaching program at Henley, we use time to think, Nancy Klein's model, and we do a time to think demo with a student who comes and volunteers. And we, those of you familiar with it, we do the ask a question about thinking, and then the client has lots of space. And what I notice in the students who are watching that is how much they're fidgeting and uncomfortable in a way that they're not with the other more active models that we demonstrate. You know, we do a systems model and it's quite interesting and characters are moving across the piece, the table, etc. Or we do a Gestalt thing and the chairs are there, etc. There's not much to see. And I often say to the students, this experience you have of watching it is going to tell you a lot about yourself and your capacity to just be.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We haven't spoken in a while, and I already know I want more conversations like this with you.
Well, we should have a coffee sometime.
We should. We will. Let's do that. Thank you, Aboodi. And for those who already don't know how to reach you, where should people find you these days?
So my website is coachingtothesoul.com. That's probably the best place to find me.
Perfect.
I'm on LinkedIn as well, and you're welcome to connect me there, but that's my website.
Lovely. Oh, and that mention of LinkedIn reminds me to say something to people listening about a new network, a group of people that you and Lee Chalmers are convening called the Psycho-Spiritual Network, which has its inaugural meeting in November. I wonder if you'd say something about that, because that is a super interesting new venture.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. And as you say, I'm doing it in collaboration with Lee, whom I've known for about 20 years. And we talk regularly about lots of things, but we talk a lot about coaching. And in the last couple of years, I think, we've been speaking increasingly openly about spirituality and about love, actually, love in coaching and our work being a vehicle of love and spirituality. And so about 6 months ago, I think I did a webinar for Henley on spirituality and coaching. And I sort of, because I knew I was leaving, maybe it was a little bit unplugged. So I just said what was on my mind and in my heart to say. And I was talking to Lee about that. And out of that conversation that we had about that, we then decided, or she suggested, I think, that we create a network and we put it up on LinkedIn and quite a lot of people have joined. And we're going to do a webinar in November. I can't remember the date right now, but we're going to do a date in November where we have a webinar where we begin to explore this. So in a sense, it might be a bit like this conversation, not having a lot of structure, but it won't just be Lee and me talking. It'll be an open forum so that people can share their views about it. And when I'm just going to flash back a bit to the webinar because it kind of goes back into what we were talking about and also signpost what might come up in this, was one of the things that came up in the webinar that I did. And it was people, and it was a broadcast webinar rather than an interactive one. So the comments are all in chat, but people were talking about some of their resistance to the word God, for instance, or their resistance to the word spirit. And so there is this thing about creating a space where we can open this up so that, as you were saying, our listeners might have their own views about this so that we can accommodate wide perspectives about this.
Lovely. Thank you.
So come along, join us.
At the Psycho-Spiritual Network, you'll find it on LinkedIn. I'm certainly going to be there.
Oh, great.
And I think it's pioneering work, exploring the links, the connections between coaching and psychotherapy, between performance coaching, love, spirituality. I think it's going to be a rich and very powerful thing, a being that is here now. Aboodi, thank you so much.
Yeah, a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, to advance the coaching profession, and to make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There you can explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools and models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.